Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Saul Weinreb, the host of the podcast, and we are beginning our study of chapter 6 of the second book of Samuel, Shmuel Bet. We are reading how David is consolidating his rule over the people and building up the nation. He moved his capital from Hebron to the outskirts of Jerusalem to Ir David, the city of David. He conquered the Philistines and who had been such a menace to the people for generations, but now they are no longer a threat. So the next thing David is going to do here, which we're going to read about, is begin bringing the religious capital, making Jerusalem not just the political capital, but the religious capital of the people. And of course, that means bringing the instruments that will eventually be placed in the temple, bringing the vessels and so on to the central location in order to make Jerusalem the religious center, the center of the worship of God. And of course, the holiest of those vessels and the one that represents the worship of the one God, which is the central defining factor of this new nation that David is the new monarch of, and is the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron Ha'edut, the Aron within which the tablets of stone given to Moshe were contained. And and as we remember, these were until now they were for the last 20 years we haven't heard of the Ark. They were in the house of Avinadav, and just sitting there, and that's where the Ark was. So David, Vayosef o David es kol bachor b'Yisrael shloshim elef. David gathered together all of the chosen men of Israel. In other words, the leaders, 30,000 of the primary citizens. 30,000 main people. And Vayakam, so he had a major procession. Vayakam vayelech David, and David got up and he went v'cholam asherito, and all the people with him, 30,000 people. Mi Baalei Yehuda, from the Baalei Yehuda. Exactly what this means, Baalei Yehuda, it would sound like the prominent places of Judah. Laha'alot misham et aron alakim. They went there to bring from there the Aron, the covenant, the Ark of God, Asher Nikra Shem Adonai Tzivaot Yoshev Hakruvim Olav. That upon that Ark was called the name, which name? The name of God, the Lord of Hosts, the one who resides among the cherubs, among the Keruvim, was called upon that Ark. It's a very grandiose, a very honorable sounding name. And David went to retrieve it, and he certainly brought an appropriate entourage with him. However, in the next verse, we see the beginnings of a big mistake, a big problem. Vayarkivu et Aron Elohim al agolo chadasha. They loaded it. They put the Aron of God, the Ark of God, upon a new chariot or a new cart. An agala is a cart, and so and as we know from the Torah, the Ark is supposed to be carried by the Leviim, by the Levites, and it's supposed to be carried by people, by human beings. The meaning behind that, there's a lot of, sermons that have been given over the years about the importance of why the Ark is carried by a person rather than by people, and by specifically the Levites, rather than placed on a cart. So already it's being handled and transported in an incorrect manner. Vayisa'uhu mi beitz Avinadav, and they carried it from the house of Avinadav asher b'Giva, that was in Giva. Ve'Uzzah v'Achyo, and two sons, Uzzah and Achyo, b'nei Avinadav, who were sons of Avinadav, so they were raised in the house in which the ark lived. Nohagim et ha'agala chadasha. They were driving or guiding the cart, which was being dragged, of course, by animals. And so the two sons, you're getting the impression that they're treating it almost like their own belongings, like so, because they were so familiar with it, because they were living in the house with it. Vayisa'u mi beit Aminadav asher b'Givah, and they carried it in this manner from the house of Aminadav, which was in the Givah, which is on the hill in the high place, im Aron Elokim, together with the Ark of God. V'achyo holech lifnei Aron, and Achyo is going before them. And while they're taking the Aron out, David v'chol Beit Yisrael, and David and all of the people of Israel, this whole entourage, misachakim lifnei Adonai, are celebrating and dancing before God. B'chol atzei v'roshim, with the sounds of cypress wood. These are noise-making instruments of kinorot, and with the harps of v'nivalim and with tupim, lyres, and cymbals, uvimnanim, and these are shaking instruments, uvitzaltzalim, and ringing instruments, all kinds of instruments and music and sound and dancing and singing and celebrating the Aron Kodesh being brought to the capital, on its way to the capital Jerusalem, to presumably to David's house, to the palace. Vayavo ad Goren Nachon, and they reached the place where Nachon had his goren, his granary, and Vayishlach Uzzah el Aron ha'Elohim vayoches bo, and Uzzah put out his hand to grasp or to support the Ark of God and held it, Kisham tu abakar, because the cattle that were pulling it along slipped, and he saw that the Aron was going to fall. Vayichar af Adonai b'Uzzah, and God got angry at Uzzah for doing this. As we know, one is not supposed to touch the Aron, and in fact, the Torah says that one who touches the Aron is punished with death, and therefore this is what happened. Vayakehu sham ha'Elohim al hashal, and God struck him there because of his mistake. Vayomas sham im Aron Elohim, and he died there together with the Aron of God. One would the way a rationalist commentaries look at this is that Uzzah died because he was struck by the Aron. He reached out to protect it, and the Aron was falling, and somehow it knocked into him, and he died. If you look at it in a more miraculous way, he just died on the spot because God made that happen. But either way, he died as a result of trying to support the Aron. Now, obviously, this particular act of trying to support the Aron is a seemingly honorable thing to do, and one would wonder why he would die because of that. So the issue is, and most commentaries focus much more on this entire event than on the specific event of him touching it. Because why did he touch it? He touched it because it was being transported in ways that is inappropriate. This is not how the Aron is supposed to be handled. The Aron is supposed to be carried by people. And who's supposed to carry it? The Leviim, the Levites are supposed to carry it. These are instructions that were clearly given in the Torah. And it's not proper honor for the Aron to be carried on an agalah, on a wagon, being dragged by cattle. Only human beings should be handling the Aron. The Aron, which represents the God of Israel, which represents his presence among his people, should be carried by his people. And that is what the Torah specifically instructed, and the end result was an accident. If you look at it in a less miraculous, more rationalistic way, the end result, why should it not be carried? Because what's going to happen? The cattle are going to fall, they're going to slip, they're not, they obviously don't care, they're not taking the same care that a person carrying it with proper respect would do, and it starts to fall, and someone's going to get hurt, and that's what happens. Vayichar David, and David became very angry, al asher paratz Adonai peretz b'Uzzah, because God had made a breach with Uzzah, by having Uzzah die at this event. David realized when this happened that they had made a big mistake. Until that time, till this day, that area, that place where it happened, is called the Peretz Uzzah, meaning the place where there was a breach related to Uzzah. And David was very afraid of God on that day. What does this mean? He was afraid of God. And he said, how could I bring the Aron, the Ark of God, to me? Now, why did David say that he was worried about bringing it to me, right? what happened? Yes, God was angry because of what happened, because David understood as a king, he led this thing, he led this to happen, right? This mistake happened because he went to get the ark and he allowed them to carry it on the in a way that it was inappropriate. David is the leader and he accepts responsibility for that. And David then realized, therefore, I cannot be the one who takes it into my home. I can't bring it into Jerusalem yet. I can't bring it there because I'm not ready. I made a big mistake. The people, we all together made a big mistake, and me at the helm. And that resulted in the death of a person. So David did not, therefore, could not bring it to the city of David. And you know, it was just Vayateu David Beit Oved Edom Hagiti. So instead, he brought it to Oved Edom of the Gittite. Now, Oved Edom was a Levi, a Levite, and so it would be an appropriate place for the ark to reside. And so clearly David learned the lesson and he brought it to where it's supposed to be. And he was actually from the family of Kehat, who was the family whose responsibility it was to watch the Aron, the ark. Vayeshev Aron Adonai Beit Oved Edom Hagiti Shalosha Chadashim, and it resided in his home for 3 months. Vayevarach Adonai et Oved Edom et Kol Beso, and God blessed Oved Edom in his home. So clearly, you know exactly what that means. The various commentaries have different ideas, but the bottom line is that it was a blessing to his home to have the ark there. And of course, as a result of the fact that they were treating the ark with proper respect at this point. So now, Vayugad Lamelech David Lemar was told to King David, saying, Beirach Adonai et Beit Oved Edom v'et kol asher lo. God has blessed the home of Oved Edom and everything that he has. Ba'avur Aron Elokim. It sounds like financial success and health and children, etc. Vayelech David Vayalet Aron Aleimi Beit Oved Edom. Now David went and he brought the ark of God from the house of Obed Edom to the city of David in a happy, rejoicing manner. Now it was done properly. As the carriers of the ark of God, clearly he learned the lesson. Now it is people carrying the ark. Every 6 steps they took, Vayizbach Shor Umari, he would sacrifice a ox, and Marie is a fattened calf. V'David mecharker b'chol oz lifnei Adonai, and David was singing and dancing with full might and strength before God. V'David chagur ephod bud, and he was wearing a linen ephod. An ephod is a garment indicative of a spiritual leader, which we've had this term numerous times. In the book of Judges and Shmuel, this idea of the ephod being worn by a religious leader. So here David is taking that place. V'David, v'chol beis Yisrael ma'alim et Aron Adonai b'teruah v'kol shofar, and David and all of the people of Israel raised up the ark of God with the sounds of a shofar, of horns blowing, and the noise of the blasts of the horns. I'm going to stop here. It's at this middle point in chapter 6. Looking for in the second part of the story focuses on a different part of the celebration, which makes a lot of sense to treat on its own in the second podcast. So we'll continue here in 6b with verse 16, and I've just read up to verse 15. Thank you so much for studying this together with me today. Looking forward to studying the rest of this book of Shmuel together, and have a wonderful day.